Hello, thank you everyone for coming and attending our workshop. I'm Abigail Stam. I'm a health informatician at Minnesota Department of Health, and this is Eric Quale. Eric, please briefly introduce yourself.
Hi, Eric Quale. I am a research scientist with the Minnesota Department of Health and have a lot of experience with full stack web development, so I can be here. Thanks for coming, everyone.
Thank you. As we go through the workshop, please put all of your questions in the chat. We will have designated points where we'll be pausing in material to address questions. I'm going to begin by giving you an introduction to online accessibility and what sorts of things you want to take into account. And we'll start with tribal state relations acknowledgement, which is something that we do in Minnesota to acknowledge the land that we are on. Eric will read the announcement.
The state of Minnesota is home to 11 federally recognized Indian tribes with elected tribal government officials. The state of Minnesota acknowledges and supports the unique political status of tribal nations across Minnesota and their absolute right to existence, self-governance, and self-determination. Unique relationship with federally recognized Indian tribes is cemented by the Constitution of the United States, treaties, statutes, case law, and agreements. The state of Minnesota and tribal governments across Minnesota significantly benefit from working together, learning from one another, and partnering where possible. Minnesota Department of Health recognizes its values and celebrates the vibrant, unique relationships between the 11 tribal nations and the state of Minnesota. Partnerships formed through government-to-government relationships with these tribes will effectively address health disparities and lead to better health outcomes for all Minnesotans. In our work at the Office of Data Strategy and Interoperability, we demonstrate our commitment to tribal-state relations by providing free assistance upon request and promoting health equity in data collection and...
Thank you, Eric. The brief outline for today is that we will go over some considerations in dashboard design, importance of web accessibility, and specific web accessibility guidelines. Then we will do 2 demonstrations of Shiny dashboards that we've built in order to illustrate several of these accessibility things. The last third of this workshop will be an actual workshop where I'll be showing you code. How do you modify the code to make it more accessible and give you an opportunity to be able to try to do it yourself. At the beginning of the chat, I linked to my repository. I will point out where in my repository to go when we get to that portion. When you're thinking about dashboard design, those of you who build online dashboards, I'm sure you've heard a lot of this before, but it's important, so it bears reminding. The first thing you want to ask is, who is your audience? What is their level of knowledge? What is their level of data savvy? How much information are you going to need to provide in your dashboard that explains what you're trying to show, not just showing a pretty chart? What is your dashboard's purpose? And how does that purpose differ from other dashboards that show similar information? Why should people visit your dashboard instead of somebody else's, or in addition to somebody else's? Maybe you've designed it to complement theirs. You want to make sure that that's clear in your design. What kind of information do you want to convey? Is this going to be a lot of text? Is this going to be a lot of images, a lot of numbers? Once you know why you want the dashboard, what you're trying to convey in it, then you need to think about, can your user access the information? If your user is blind or visually impaired, do they still have access to the information that you're showing in that pretty infographic? If they're deaf or hard of hearing, do they still have access to the information in your podcast? If they're unable to use a mouse, can they still get at the information in a pop-up in your chart, for example? When we talk about prioritizing accessibility, there are a lot of reasons that you should do it, a lot of reasons that your company should do it. First, it expands the audience. You'll be able to reach many more people if many more people are able to access the information. It demonstrates social responsibility and inclusiveness. It shows that everybody matters to you. In many local, state, and national laws, it requires some level of accessibility. And a lot of the time, the enhancements that you include in order to make things more accessible for other people also help to improve the user experience for everyone. Even if somebody who is not blind, for example, if you provide text descriptions in your dashboard as well as just the picture, somebody who's not blind who can't understand the chart will still be able to access the information via the text. The way that you address a lot of these accessibility guidelines, or a place to start to address a lot of these accessibility guidelines, is the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, which is an international consortium and is updated somewhat regularly. There are a lot of web content accessibility guidelines that are met by default in Shiny. I have put a list here. We will not be going into most of these in any detail, and these slides are available on my GitHub if you want to review this list later. One thing to note with this list is that while they are in Shiny by default, you may end up writing CSS code or other code, JavaScript code, that would override them. So it's still important to know that they're there and that they're important and that you should include them in testing. But if your dashboard is fairly simple and you're not doing anything very custom, probably your dashboard will already meet these. These are the guidelines that I'm going to be covering in some detail in the slides. Non-text content, sensory characteristics, identify input purpose, use of color, contrast, non-text contrast, content hover on focus, page titled, link purpose, heading and labels, error identification, and labels or instructions. These are all things that the developer or the designer needs to keep in mind when you're putting your dashboard together. Titles and links are probably the easiest. Page titled just means that your dashboard has a title and that your browser tab has a title, so that if the person tabs away, they can still find the correct tab later. Link purpose means that instead of just saying click here, where here is highlighted and sends you to your link, it should say something like click Epsilon, and then it goes to the Epsilon homepage, so that if somebody only looks at the link, they know what to expect. Headings and labels. When you're doing headings in a Shiny dashboard, don't just say bold and of larger font. You want to use the heading tags, which in HTML is the H-pound, or in Markdown is the pound, however many numbers you're doing. Because for screen readers, that helps the screen reader, and sometimes the keyboard navigation, to know where you are in the page and helps to orient somebody who can't see the page. Non-text elements, including labels, captions, including non-text content like buttons and things, and images, should include labels, captions, ARIA text, again, so that a screen reader is able to pick up what this element does, so that somebody who's navigating with keyboard and screen reader can interact with your site. Inputs. When we talk about inputs, we all like our inputs in Shiny. This is why we like Shiny. We want to make sure to provide the information via text as well as images and sounds, as I've mentioned several times. And you want to make sure that all non-text elements are labeled. You want those labels to be short and clear, and you want to include what their function is. If it's a button, then say button or clickable or something within the information that the screen reader reads. Identify input purpose. You want to make sure that it's clear what a user is supposed to do with their text boxes, drop-downs, sliders, whatever other inputs are there. What kind of information is allowed? What information will break your app? Labels and instructions. You want to make sure that your user can navigate your site, that they can find the information they're looking for without getting frustrated, and that they can understand how they can interact with the site to change information and what information is available if they change the inputs. For non-text content, that's the alternative text that I've already talked about a little bit, as well as the accessible, rich internet application text. Again, this is a lot of, if it isn't text, make sure it has a label that a screen reader can access. Color. We like using color in our charts. It makes them look pretty. But things to keep in mind when we're using color. We want to make sure that the contrast is high enough. If elements are touching, this includes both text and background, or maybe two slices in a bar chart. You want to make sure that the ratio is at least 3:1. If the font size or text to background is smaller, 18 or smaller, then the ratio needs to be at least 4.5:1, which is much higher. If you are using color within text to make it stand out in some way, bear in mind that screen readers will not recognize when text changes color. So you want to make sure that that information also is available in some other way. So maybe have a follow-up sentence that emphasizes that point that you were trying to show in color. Error identification. You want to give the user some clue of what's going on if an element fails or if an element is slow. Provide some messaging so they know what to do and how to address the issue. Content hover on focus. This is where you are hovering over an image in order to get more information about it. If you hover over a map, maybe it will give you some more information about the country that your mouse is over. Not everybody can access this. Keyboards cannot always access this. Screen readers cannot always access this. If you have information that's in a pop-up, you want to make sure that it's also available someplace else. My go-to in the dashboards that I build is tables. Eric will be showing you an example later where you could use lists instead. You can also include a downloadable text file. I know a lot of people like having CSVs of the data, so having that downloadable CSV is probably a good thing anyway. Now I will hand it over to Eric to talk about our packages and tools. Eric, I can't hear you. You're still muted.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, okay, so we've got some R packages that address accessibility here. Shining AI is like a R package that you can run tests for accessibility on, right inside R. It's client-side check for ARIA roles, keyboard focus, and weak A compliance. Braille R provides text descriptions for blind users. There's a few different ways to do that, and that package is good. I used it to the development of the app, and I'll kind of show you later how that works. Sonify is a cool way to translate your data into audio files, and just a new way of interpreting and experiencing the data. Tactile R is you're able to create swell paper. It allows the user to make Braille text, and if you have the correct printer, you can print out something that's Braille accessible. And HTML tools is important, being able to just like get the accessibility features that you need into HTML. It just allows direct access to the HTML code. Next. Yeah, kind of talked about Shining AI already, but Andy is a great tool for, it's like a bookmark, which is a little weird, but you just activate the bookmark, and then you can get a great view of the tab order, of the ARIA roles, the labels, value elements. It kind of shows you exactly what the screen readers are going to interpret. Wave is great for weak A compliance. It checks color ratios really well. It does a lot of kind of what Andy does, but it's good to have multiple tools to check. Also, another great thing about Wave is it'll bring you directly to the code. There's an option, you just like hit the code button and it takes you to right where the error it identified is. Accessibility does a lot of the same things that Andy and Wave does, but it's got a command line interface and you can integrate it into like a CI/CD development, which is neat. And NVDA is one of the screen readers. So that's a great kind of final check or ongoing check to just make sure that the screen reader is actually interpreting what you think it is. I think using a lot of these in conjunction makes sense. You catch a lot of errors in different ways just going through the code. Going through the code in conjunction with these tools. So it just confirms that you're doing what you think you're doing. So, thanks, Abby.
To take any questions. I did see that there were some questions in the chat. Eric, do you have an answer for this? Good packages that can create alt text for spatial data?
Braille R could probably do some of that. I think I can cover during my section sort of how I did it for the mapping section that I have. So I've got something on that coming up.
Okay, thank you. Somebody else noted the AFTable package for automating creation of accessible spreadsheets. I haven't used that one. Are you familiar with it?
I'm not, no, I haven't used that.
We'll have to look into it and see if it's something we want to add to our toolbox. Another question, any tools for assessing color contrast for colorblind users? I have been using ColorSpace. There's a color contrast checker, or I forget exactly what it's called, ratio checker or something that you can use. Any other questions?
Yeah, color contrast analyzer is a good one. Just saw that cover.
Thank you. As I mentioned at the beginning, this is where you can find all of most of our content. We have one dashboard that is not up there yet. And that's all I have for the slides. I'm going to stop. And now I'm going to share a dashboard that I created specifically to illustrate several of these WCAG standards. After that, Eric will share a dashboard that goes above and beyond WCAG standards that includes the things like sound and Braille. And then we will go into showing you how to implement some of these things. In this dashboard, I'm going to start with the table tab. Maybe. Okay, it takes a minute to load. My computer is slow running it via the conference thing at the same time. When we look at the table tab, the first thing I'm curious about is, does my keyboard work? And when we talk about focus on content, what we're talking about is as you're using the keyboard, and I'm tabbing through things right now, does it change the element in some way so that you can tell where your keyboard is? Here you can see that it's outlined in blue. The idea when you're doing keyboard accessibility is that only things that are clickable should be highlighted. So here I have the first item in the table is highlighted. It is also clickable, so that if I click it, it extends the rest of the elements in that row. You want to be able to navigate via keyboard. If I go through the entire navigation, then you can see that it would take me down through the left from bottom to top, or from top to bottom. And then when it gets to individual data, it would highlight only individual data. You'd need to use the arrows to go to one of the other tabs. And then if you continue to tab, then it would take you down into this again from left to right, top to bottom. If we want to look at the meaningful sequence, then Andy is good for that. Andy is what's called a bookmarklet, where you can just click it here and it will open a box that allows you to explore things. So if I want to look at tab order, for example, then you can see going down from top to bottom. And then when it gets to 9, these are X's because these you would actually reach via something other than a tab. It also will give you information about what the elements are called. Label tags, that's what I want. So if I go down to my N1A1, it actually gives you the ARIA label is not just N1A1, it gives you all of the information you need to be able to identify this penguin. Even though in the table, it only highlights this, but then if you can see this other information in the next couple of cells. Going to the bar plot tab, here is a bar chart of penguin species by island. The Adelie penguin bar is very low contrast. That white and that light blue are almost the same. So if you want to make it more friendly for people who need high contrast, that's pretty easy. We can just add a border. We'll add a blue border for now. And once we add the blue border, now we have a strong contrast between these two items. However, it's possible that people will still get confused between colors, especially if you have, say, this palette instead, because these are all categorical. You don't need a gradient scale for categorical data. But some people might have trouble differentiating, say, between the green and the purple. So if you want to differentiate the information further, then we can do a textured fill, which again, will take a moment to upload or update. And then we get textured elements. I'm using GG textures for this, and I just made up a bunch of PNG images that had very different patterns. And then, content hover or focus. If you have content that is only accessible via hovering, here I'm saying this is what content this bar in this chart is showing. I also provide that information as a table, and I also provide it as a download so that people have multiple ways of accessing the same information. In the line chart tab, line chart of all species by year hatched. Again, somebody might have trouble telling between the green and the purple. In addition, if I hover over here, nothing happens. So I think the first thing I'm going to do is say I want to show both lines and markers. Because if I'm showing both lines and markers, then people can see where they need to go in order to get the hover information if they can access hover information. However, if you still can't differentiate colors, then we may want our lines to vary so that now we can tell the difference between the Gentoo and the Adelie penguin lines. You can also choose the option for markers to vary. If we do that, then each line will have a marker of a different type. Some people can find that very busy. There's too many differences here and they have trouble following it all. So I only like to make markers different if I'm doing some sort of cross-tabulation. If I was showing lines for both males and females of each of the penguin species, for example. This is where user testing can be very helpful. Anytime you build a dashboard, you should be asking your intended audience how they're interacting with it and how they find it useful for you to convey information, and then you can make some of these changes based on their feedback. The text formatting tab has nothing to do with penguins, but was a lot of fun to write. On this tab, I'm going to illustrate some information about text spacing, text size, and text color contrast. At the moment, I have a purple text on a white background. It has a contrast ratio of 5.3, so that no matter which font size it would still pass because it's above 4.5. If I want to do, say, red, I have text size 18 here. If I scroll up, I'm going to find that the contrast ratio is only 4, but the font size is 18, so it needs to be at least 4.5. So it failed. I changed the color here depending on whether the contrast ratio passed or failed. But again, not everybody can access the color of the text. So I also include a tag whether it passed or failed after the number. If I'm determined to use red, then I can still use red, but I need to make it a much larger font size. So in this case, font size 24, it passes. If I want to use orange, I'm out of luck. It's a contrast ratio of just under 2. It'll fail no matter what size my font is. The other thing I just wanted to show you, because it's important for people who have disabilities like dyslexia, if your letters are very close together, like this TTI, they can all run together, and some people won't be able to separate them out into separate letters. So allowing people to be able to change the font, the text spacing is very helpful. You can do that by including a bookmarklet like text spacing, which would override and allow it to space text if people want that. You'll want to make sure that something like that will work with your app and you're not putting something in the CSS that would override it. For screen readers, the only picture I have in this particular app is the Palmer Penguin logo. You'll want to make sure that that information is accessible to screen readers. The way I can check that is to look at inspect accessibility properties I'm in Firefox right now. It's something that they have. And then if you dig down a little bit, you have to dig pretty far. It's not a super fast thing to use. Then I can see that this is the text that a screen reader would read when it gets to this logo. Palmer Penguins are package logo. You also want to check that your links make sense. What I like to do with links is if content does not have its own dedicated page, Color Brewer has its own dedicated page. But Palmer Penguins is on GitHub, so I like to include in the link that you're going to GitHub. Some people will put it in parentheses or something instead. That's also fine. You just want your user to be able to know where the link takes them if all they see is the link, or if all their screen reader reads is the link. As I mentioned before, screen readers do not generally recognize things like italic and bold. So if something is italic and bold, you want to specify it in some other way as well, if that's important. Another thing to be aware of is that you want to try not to be redundant with information. So if you have text that says something about below is the Palmer Penguins logo, you may not want the screen reader to pick up the alt text for the image because it's essentially the same thing. And there's things you can read online to learn how to be less redundant when you're dealing with screen readers. For site use criteria, you want to have labels, instructions. Make sure that the user knows how to interact with your site. I have instructions here saying, here's what you can do. And also, content will update as you make changes so that somebody who's using this won't be caught off guard when suddenly the content changes. I also include a table of contents so that they know what is in each tab without having to visit the tab first. Then when I get to the tabs and the information they have, I like to add a verb, at least, so that people know what they can do. So select, filter, enter. These are all words that give them some kind of information. If you go to the filter by date by eggs hatched, you cannot go before November 4th because there's no data before November 4th. So I try to limit what they can choose based on what data are available. One really nice thing about Shiny, which you also want to check because different Shiny templates will work differently, is that it already has reflow. Reflow is where if you change the size and shape of the page so that you're looking at a cell phone instead of a laptop, it will bring the sidebar up to the top and it will bring the main panel below it. Some will reverse this, and if you have a right sidebar, it might place it in a different place. But it takes the different elements and shifts them around so that it makes more sense for a vertical display. Also, you want to make sure that your content can be viewable at 400%. Right now I have it set for 200%. All you need to do is go to whatever your browser you're using, however it tests. I'm in Firefox, so in Windows it's Control Plus. And I can go up to 400 and even 500%, and I can see that the content is still visible. If we go to the bar chart, it squeezes it. The font is a bit smaller maybe than we want. We might want to look into that, but it squeezes the bar chart so that it still fits on the page. So everything looks good. And that's all I have to show with this dashboard. So I'm going to hand it over to Eric to share his dashboard, which goes above and beyond WCAG standards.
Thanks, Abby. Is that showing now?
I'm not seeing it yet now.
I'm sorry, 1 second. There it is. Thank you.
Now
Okay. Hey, everyone. Yeah, thanks. So this is kind of a accumulation of a lot of different efforts we've been having at MDH and around. Like we've even been working on a project specifically for disability community. So I kind of wanted to play around with Shiny and see what are some of like the above and beyonds we could kind of do and what specific communities we could help out with and address. And really at MDH, we just have a lot of passionate people about accessibility too. So it's nice to kind of find that niche between where you can help the data scientists still use Shiny and also be able to meet all the accessibility requirements. And in fact, Shiny is often one of the only options that's even able to meet WCAG standards completely. Like a lot of the commercial products just can't do it. Basically for this, what I ended up doing was a lot of CSS, just kind of toggling between different CSS properties and using Shiny.js to inject JavaScript where I need to kind of manipulate the DOM how I can to kind of get a little more accessibility out of Shiny. So I think one of the features right up here, accessibility options. You can manipulate the text size throughout the entire app. It's kind of cool to have this like widget. Somebody was talking, I saw in the comments just about the contrast mode. So here's like with the high contrast mode toggled on, this would be great if you're a penguin on the beach and the sun's kind of bright and you want to just get to the facts. And then we've also got dark mode. Like dark mode isn't required by WCAG, but one thing to keep in mind when if you're implementing these different CSS themes, there's a lot of different kind of states that things can be in, like on hover, if the button is disabled or active. It's good to run tests and actually like go through your app, because tools like Wave and Andy, they're only going to be looking at like the current state usually, so might not catch like on hover, for example. Reduce motion, there's a CSS property that, well, it slows down transition speeds, animations. It's good for people with motion sickness or a vestibular disorder. So it's nice to kind of include that. But again, I think that's probably not part of WCAG, but potentially good. Next thing to draw attention to, the different kind of ARIA labels that you can generate. So I went through and just kind of created like above and beyond kind of screen reader descriptions that you can feed in, because a lot of times you'll just see like this is a chart, but it doesn't tell you a whole lot about the data. And one thing I would recommend with this, you can write a generic function that's got a bit of the script about the chart that you're trying to display. You can even feed in the chart type and different relevant values, like if you're interested in the min max and the average, sure, pump them in. And that way you won't have to update your ARIA labels or your screen reader descriptions with every data update. It'll update alongside it, as long as the overall the chart structure is the same. And then here's the way to just dynamically change the screen reader description, the ARIA label, as you go along. So yeah, and kind of as I'm talking, if there's things you're curious or something else you'd like to do, one of my goals is to just create some modules and some templates for accessibility features that have a lot of this kind of like taken care of. So if people are interested in something else that's not here, let me know. I also, let's see, added this focus box so you can see where the keyboard is. Just kind of how I did the map. The map you're able to tab into, and all of these options are keyboard navigable as well. You can navigate into the map and then pan around. So this is just like an event listener looking for keyboard inputs. You have to tell it that you're only interested in the map area, which is interesting. And then somebody pointed out that markers, you can add alt text to markers, but often it's good to have that information displayed elsewhere too. So this sidebar is just displaying the same marker information that you would see here, and that's like it's updating along with whatever filters people are applying. Okay, yeah, I see a couple questions. I'll get to those here at the end. The other thing I wanted to show is data table. Somebody had asked about React table and DT table. I was able to get DT table to be as accessible as I wanted with the help of Run.js and Shiny.js. It was kind of a pain, but I was able to get it done. And then it was even able to go as far as you can pull up these little modals about penguins if you wanted to drill down in a different way. So I think a lot of these penguins, they're just not wanting to be known for their bill length and their flipper length. They've got other interests in life. This penguin's into some wild stuff. But yeah, so that's kind of a neat feature. And then moving right along, the Sound Explorer I think is just neat. I really like this idea, so I just kind of wanted to draw attention to this R package. I'm probably not going to play it right now, but you can get a feel for the overall pattern and trend of the data just by creating a sonification of it. And then here's the tactile graphics that we were sort of mentioning earlier. And this is like an example of how that output would look. And so anything in black here, those that swell paper, that'll be swelled. So um, it's readable in Braille. And I mean, also the chart, well, those bars will be raised as well. So kind of interesting. And then finally, I integrated this little chat help bot down here. I've got some hard-coded kind of responses, but then you're also able to tell me about the charts on this app. And right, so it's integrated with OpenAI, and then I've got like a prompt engineering kind of bit where I've told, you're a helpful Penguin accessibility explorer, and here are the features of my website. Please don't bring up anything that's not, on the website. So it's a kind of an interesting way that somebody could use keyboard navigation and explore above and beyond, I guess, the ARIA labels and whatnot, because you're never going to be able to probably catch everything. I think this probably, it's an interesting idea. It took me a little fiddling to just get it narrowed down to what was only on the website. So you still probably have your normal issues with hallucinations and whatnot with LLMs. But the other thing you can do is feed in the active state that the app is in. So you can feed in selected values to that prompt if you wanted to, which adds a whole other layer of like complexity and accessibility, I guess. So cool. So I think those are like the main topics I wanted to cover with this, but it's interesting how much I think Shiny's been able to do. So anyway, thanks. Questions?
Someone asked, can you hide the screen reader description text in the UI to limit clutter, but still have them available for a screen reader?
Oh yeah, I just added that so people could get an idea of what was there. Yeah, normally that wouldn't be shown, but you could. I mean, that's kind of interesting.
Someone else asked, can we connect the SSRS report to our Shiny dashboard? I'm not sure what SSRS means.
Yeah, I'm not sure on that either, but I'm interested in that. I'd like to follow up on that one.
How was the chatbot added?
So the chatbot added, I got the open API key, and basically it's like a mini chat GPT in your app. So there's an OpenAI library now for Shiny. So you just add it in there, you get the API, you create the little text box, and you're just basically sending like, your prompt back and forth, and you're just getting the feedback from OpenAI.
Another question, I'm not sure if this is considered accessibility related, but does anyone know if there's a way to have a toggle that could translate text on the page between English and Spanish?
I didn't do that, but I think there's services for that, but probably couldn't speak on that right now.
I think there are ways to do it through like Google Translate. I haven't tried implementing them myself. The way that we've done it with other projects, but not a Shiny dashboard at work, is that we would have an interpreter provide translations for any content, usually in fact sheets, and then we would have code that would read from a lookup table which language it is, and therefore what text should go in each section for each language. But we don't have a demonstration of that, and we have not implemented it in Shiny at this time. Any idea how to test if the Shiny app is suited for viewing on a mobile phone or an iPad?
Yeah, I don't know if we mentioned too much about reflow, but it gets into reflow. Usually Shiny does that fairly well, but you do want to test it. So when you're like structuring your HTML, your different div elements or containers, they're going to be able to be squished together, and they should just kind of squish in a logical order. And you want to worry about that probably not just for cell phones, but for different screen sizes, especially for disabled community. There's a lot of people on tablets, so you can test it out on the like various sizes.
There's
But that's
also
Mhm.
there's also tools, and you'll have to follow up with me after because I don't recall the name. But there are tools where you can say, show this content as if it was in a screen size of X or as if it was in a mobile phone, and that you can do it within your browser in some browsers, and that allows you to simulate what you should see if you were on a mobile phone. And Eric, do you have the dashboard that you just showed on GitHub somewhere? Someone requested the link.
I will put it. I can probably push it to your GitHub too, Abby. So we can get it all in one spot.
Okay, that sounds good. Someone asked, can I come and work with you both and learn your craft?
Yes, please.
We are always looking for good people. We don't have any hiring opportunities at the moment, though. But
It's been a rough week in public health.
somebody suggested Jay Chang's Fives chatbot. I don't know if you've worked with it or not.
No.
Do you know if the accessibility packages you work with are also work with Shiny Mobile? And do you know of an example mobile app that meets WCAG standards? I have not worked with Shiny Mobile and have not explicitly tried to make mobile apps WCAG friendly, so I can't answer that question. Eric, do you have anything?
I haven't done that either.
The closest we've done is just free flow in our apps that are designed for laptops and things. Somebody suggested Rhinoverse Shiny i18n for internationalization of Shiny apps. I don't know if that was in response to the language question. Someone asked, is Shiny currently using Bootstrap 4 or 5? Do you know?
I don't know.
Someone else answered that BSLib uses 5, but they're not sure about base Shiny.
I'm using BSLib, so if BSLib is on 5 now, then yeah.
Someone else asked if you used BrailleR for the map in your app.
I didn't. I like BrailleR. I thought I learned a lot from that package, but in the end, I ended up just kind of making custom functions for it.
Someone asked about documentation for building a Shiny app via Rhino. We did not use Rhino, so I cannot comment on it.
Rhino's cool. I like Rhino. I didn't use it for this stuff.
Is there a great way to simulate a phone's environment or leverage the different screen layouts to test accessibility?
There's tools online. You can also change your browser size.
Changing browser size allows to check visibility and order, but I know that one big difference with mobile phones is being able to do touchscreen things like sliding, and I don't have a good way to test that offhand. That's all of the questions. So I'm going to move into my demonstration app. Before I do, I'm going to put a link in the chat. Okay, the link I put in chat will take you to the script that I will be showing in RStudio. And this is a basic Shiny app that we are going to add some accessibility features to so that you can see how it works. Am I successfully sharing my screen? Yes. Okay, this is a simple app. I'm going to show you what you see when you run it. Oh, come on. Like I said, my computer's being very sluggish. This app just has fun with irises. You can choose the number of bins in a histogram. You can choose the iris species in a histogram, and then it displays the histogram. Nothing fancy. When I look at this, there are several issues that come to mind. If I open it in a web browser, I'm using Firefox. The first thing I'm going to notice as I'm waiting for it to load is that there's no title here, and I'd like to fix that. The other thing that I know but have not explicitly checked, and I'm curious now if it will show it here. It does. There's no language declaration here. So if you were using a screen reader, the screen reader wouldn't know what language to read the text in. It might guess from whatever your defaults are for your Windows environment or your Mac environment, or it might go by where you're located, but you haven't given it what language it should be. So we're going to first add a title and language. If you look at the other, one of the other scripts in that same folder, it's called Fixed App. I'm just going to be pulling information little by little into the app to fix so that we can see it by degrees. And if I put these two things here, I put them in the UI, which is set up as a fluid page. I use tags HTML lang equals n to add that my dashboard is in English. And I add tags title fun with irises. It's the same as the H1 title, but now it's going to explicitly show up in the browser tab title thing. So I'm going to save these and reload my app. And then I will open it again. And it gives me the correct title. And if I go to inspect, I can see that it's added HTML class equals nothing, lang equals n. So it now a screen reader will know what language to read it in. Next, I'll go back here for a moment because it's easier to show. And I'm going to make it smaller than the 400 point that I was using in my last one. We'll go down to 200 point so you can, I hope, still read the text. If I am using keyboard, or right now I'm tabbing, and there's only two things here. So once I get through all of my elements here, now I am actually on number of bins. I can go forward and backward, but there's no keyboard focus. I have no idea that I'm on number of bins, except that the next thing I click will be iris species. And then if I do Shift Tab to go back, I'm on number of bins again, but I can't see that. I don't know what's going on. So I don't really want to use a slider for my app if I don't have keyboard focus. So I'm going to fix that. I go up to where my keyboard focus is, or where my slider input is here, and I'm going to do an equivalent, but I'm going to make it a text input. And I will just comment out my slider for now and make sure that my app still works. And I now have number of bins is something I can see. And if I tab over it, you can tell that you're on the number of bins, and then you can change it to whatever. If you delete it, I get an error. That I can fix too. But what bothers me even more than the error is that I can put any number, but it might not look very good. And so I might want to give better instructions to my user about what they can put in this field and maybe make it clear that it needs to be a number. So I'm going to fix both the error and also the language to make it a bit clearer. To fix the error, I need to go down to my output hist plot. And here I create an object that takes input bins and makes it numeric. The problem is if input bins doesn't exist, then it's NA, and then the code breaks. So what I need to do is say, well, if input bins is NA, do something different so that we don't break the app. And what I did was to say, if it's NA, it equals 10. Because if you delete here, my suggested value is 10. So I want to be consistent with my suggested value. Then if I save and I reload, then open again, then I have number of bins equals 15. If I delete it to 10, then it defaults to, or delete it so there's no value, then it defaults to 10. Next, I want to make that a bit clearer so that we know what we can type there. So I go up to my sidebar code and use this text. That gives you, enter the number of bins to display in the chart, 2 to 29, so that you have a suggestion of what number you should put, what number might look nice. And while we're at it, like I said, I like to add verbs in my prompts, my user prompts. So I'm going to update the iris species as well. And I'm going to say, not only select an iris species, but it's going to then display in the chart. Then if I reload my app again, then you get the full language here. And it's a bit easier for the user to understand what's going on. Next, that's great. I'm glad we have the information here, but maybe the user would want something to orient themselves to the full dashboard. So if I want to orient them to the full dashboard, I can add some more information right here in the main panel. So I'm going to scroll down to my main panel. I have an H2 and a P that give me some text that I can add here. I want to use H2 because this is H1, and when you're using things like keyboard navigation, it's very important to do your headings in order. You don't want to go straight from H1 to H3 because that can confuse it. So if you're starting at H1, the next lower level should always be H2. Then I'm going to save and again reload. And now I have some information about what's happening here, and I give you some instructions. I tell you where to find the information above or to the left. I do this language because of reflow, because I've already tested and I know that my sidebar is going to move to the top if we're in a very narrow screen. I could also add, and probably should also add, something like the chart updates in real time as you make your selections. So that if I want to do 18, but I press backspace, then it takes me to 1, it gives me a 1, and then I can enter 8 and it will redraw it. It doesn't wait until I'm done typing to go straight from 15 to 18. And some users could be confused by that. Next, I want to add alt text, because at the moment, if I go to my inspect accessibility properties and I look at main, which has lots of fun things going on, image, it just says plot object. That is not helpful. We want it to say something other than plot objects. So there's a couple things we can do here, and I'm going to do them both at once. One, I'm going to add some text in my panel that explains what's happening in the chart, and I'm also going to add alt text to the chart. In this case, they're going to be very redundant for this demonstration. I do not recommend making them redundant in your actual app. If we want to add alt text to our plot, then you can go to the render plot item, and the render plot item has an option for alt text. And this option it can be just a generic string if you want. So I could say alt my pretty histogram, but I'm choosing to make it reactive because I want it to update as I change the species. And when I change the species, not only does the species change, but the sepal width, mins, and maxes change, and I want to make sure that's reflected in my alt text. The other thing I want to do at the same time is put a very similar thing as description in the text. And it's going to do the same thing. It's going to update the species and the sepal width values based on the species selected. In order to make my text show up here, of course, I will also need to add it in my main panel. And then if I reload my app, then I get the text here that tells you what you can see. And then if we do our inspect, oops, sorry, I want accessibility inspect specifically because it's a little shorter. Then it gives us histogram of sepal widths in centimeters for all irises. Sepal widths range from A to B with mean of C. And that's what we want to see. That is, oh, did want to note for the keyboard slider, I forgot to mention, I showed you with a single-headed slider why I don't like using it with keyboard accessibility. If you're using a double-headed slider, that does not work with keyboard accessibility at all. So just don't. Find some other way to display that information. The other thing that I wanted to show you here is I mentioned, or Eric mentioned, shiny A11Y in the slides. I just want to show you briefly what it looks like if you're reading it into your dashboard. And this is something that you would do explicitly for testing. You'll need to download shiny A11Y from GitHub. It's not available on CRAN. And then you would use the function use tote A11Y. It looks like use totally, but those are not L's. And then if we reload our app again, you can see this little eyeglasses thing shows up in the corner. And when you click on the eyeglasses thing, it brings up a menu. The menu allows you to check each of these things. I will note that it's helpful in some ways and not so helpful in others. I want to check the image alt text for my plot and then close it so that I can see. It doesn't even note that there is image alt text in my plot, which is a problem. But if you use the screen reader wand and then you scroll over the image, then with the screen reader wand, it will tell you what the alt text says, which is for some reason doesn't show up when I'm checking for alt text. So you'll want to note little things like that if you use shiny A11Y. But with a more complex dashboard, it can be nice to pick up on things like color contrast or if links are set up correctly. That is everything I wanted to show with this dashboard. Do we have questions? Eric, did you note any questions while I was talking? Someone asked, do we have a recording for this task? Which task are you talking about? This entire workshop is being recorded, if that's what you mean. And then someone asked, can I make a dashboard slidable? It will reload every 10 seconds. I'm not quite sure what they're asking. Eric, do you have an answer for that?
Oh, there you go. Yeah, you could do that. I mean, I've done things like that in the past. But if you're interested in going over that more, maybe reach out. I can send you some code on how to do that. It's definitely doable.
Are there any rules for when to use dynamic sizing as opposed to static sizing for elements like text, sidebar width, etc.?
Yeah, I sent the link to the WCAG guidelines. That link in there just is, that's the w3.org link, so you can get all the rules in there. There's also, like, I didn't go over the text spacing, but there's rules for that too. It's all kind of, you could do it almost like this, kind of the same way as with that slider. You could even have a separate slider for text spacing if you wanted.
For Shiny user can use AI tool named Shiny Assistant, which can help in building dashboards. I have not tried it.
Lana just pumps out, like if it's a simple app, it can just create a lot of things for you. I kind of like recommend making sure you understand what's going on a little bit. Yeah.
How do we get access to links in the chat? They should be online. As far as I know, the links are all just available on your browser. What are regulations in the USA regarding WCGA, I'm guessing you mean WCAG, for internal tools such as Shiny app that's only used by employees and not accessed by the general public?
We still try to meet accessibility standards within the agency. I don't think it happens 100% of the time, but the goal for anything external, there's like communications, we'll do a review and make sure we're compliant, because there are laws about that, but internally it's only a policy.
My logic when I do it is internally, I don't know that there won't be users who are blind or visually impaired or users who can only use keyboards. So I want to assume that even the employees in my agency will need some access to accessibility features.
Yeah. EDA, there are people that have been sued for not meeting WCAG compliance in Minnesota for sure. I won't go into like specifics, but it can be expensive.
Someone asked if the links would be shared with the recordings. Is the chat available as part of the recording? Joanna, can you answer that? Joanna's our tech person. Someone else wrote, not a lawyer, but would recommend making accessible so you don't run afoul of ADA if you're in the United States. Other countries will have their own rules. Someone wrote, accessibility is really important to me, so I appreciate it being covered. My absolute favorite stats professor would let me pet his guide dog after lectures. Joanna said that the chat is not available. We can capture the links in the chat and maybe post them to a document in the repo. Make sure that it's all there. So if you have the link to the repo, you should be able to find everything. But it will take us a little while to set it up. For interactive visualization, is HighCharter the best choice for accessibility compliance? We don't use it because of the license and the fact that we're government and it's tricky. I can't comment.
Yeah, Plotly has some issues with accessibility, especially with kind of like all of just the complexity of the hovering and whatnot. And there's like tends to be color ratios if you have a lot of different items in the legend.
One thing I have noticed with Plotly as well, if you're in R, I'm told it's different in Python, but I haven't tried it in Python. But in R, Plotly does not allow textured charts. If you try to put a texture in your ggplot, it just won't recognize it.
All the charts I used were just ggplot.
So when I did the interactive chart in my dashboard, I did GG textures, and then I used ggRAF as the conversion thing to allow the pop-ups.
Yep, Nikki's talking about iChart R needing a license. Yeah, we are the same issue. Yeah.
Any other questions? Not seeing anything. I don't mind hanging out for a little while, but that's all of the content that we have for today.
Was there any thing that people have been struggling with in meeting accessibility with Shiny that wasn't covered here? Are there any like challenges that you've had?
Someone asked, in your experience, which pieces of accessibility are most commonly missed? For me personally, when I'm playing with things, I find that websites often are not keyboard accessible or sufficiently keyboard accessible, especially if they have things like infographics and no way to dig into the information you need.
Yep. Tab order being out of place, missing labels, missing alt text, missing alt text is really common. Or if they have alt text, they don't have ARIA labels. Color contrast ratios, quite often. Sometimes themes, even like that are professionally made, have color contrast ratios that aren't compliant in themselves, which makes it hard for branding guidelines and whatnot.
We like to joke that the Minnesota logo is not color contrast compliant.
Not all the colors.
Logo.
If you don't use all of them at once, you can get away with it. But yeah, you got to be a little bit cognizant of that. So.
Someone asked, what package do you recommend for tables? They are asking about React Table.
Yeah, I used React Table kind of earlier on. I just wasn't able to get the kind of keyboard accessibility inside each cell that I wanted to. I had to use DT tables and JavaScript to get that done. Although I did have kind of limited success, so it might have been possible. I was just wasn't able to do it. But React Table, I think if you're not doing anything too complex, like if you don't need that level of keyboard accessibility inside the table, it seems to work really well.
Someone saying that they are looking forward to seeing us again at Tidy Tuesday. That's our workplace, our user group meetings. Someone asked, I'm building a Shiny app using Rhino package, but the documents from GitHub and Epsilon are limited. So I hope in the future detailed documents about using Rhino will come soon. What I personally would love to see is more interest in the development of some of these things to include accessibility features in ways that are easy, the way I can just add the alt text to the render plot without having to do a lot of custom JavaScript and other things in order to get it to show up. And I would love a way for some of these plots to be able to include textured graphics.
Yeah, there were a couple of things that Abby and I got stuck on, I think, earlier on, like that select eyes feature, Abby.
Oh, I forgot to even show select eyes.
No,
That's,
select eyes was like the bane of our existence for an afternoon one day.
yeah.
But if you turn select eyes false, things get easier.
Have you had success with creating R Markdown or Quarto docs that are accessible, specifically HTML reports and dashboards with HTML widgets?
Yeah. Did you have any specific challenges there? Kind of easy when, or easier when you have access to the HTML.
How can you make option group select eyes inputs accessible? Picker inputs are performing fine. Problem on one of our web pages from the assessment. In this filter, there are visual elements present in a list, but not in a list with each having its own role option element. The thing I forgot to show you in the walkthrough of the app is that we had to deactivate select eyes in order to get our drop-down menu to work correctly with screen readers. So I have not tried using select eyes inputs, but if you need to have select eyes equals true for it, it doesn't surprise me that you ran into problems.
Yeah. Yeah, if you try messing around, like put select eyes as false and see if you can get it done there. I think that's an argument for select eyes input, so it should be fine.
Are there any questions that I missed? Can you please name the packages again that you use for hover over text? Somebody mentioned bslib. I wrote my own hover text functions because I like to have a lot of control about what shows up in the text. And in order to incorporate it into the plots, I've been using either Plotly or gggraph or Leaflet. Yeah. How did you do it for your plot? Did you use your map? Did you use Leaflet?
Yeah, I use Leaflet, Leaflet extras, Leaflet providers. I don't know. The keyboard nav is all like event listeners for with Shiny.js stuff.
Can you share some best practices for using ARIA elements?
You want to
My
take it? Go
my
ahead.
personal best practice is if I have an element that is not plain text, I want to make sure that when I'm using a keyboard, it's obvious what that element does. So I want to include the function, if it's a dropdown, if it's a button, if it's some other thing, and how I need to interact with it. I want to make sure that when the keyboard tabs over it, it doesn't just say list of 5 items, uh, apple selected, pear unselected, etc. I want to make sure that it includes what the prompt is. So select your favorite fruit, and then the list of 5 items. And that's why we turn off select eyes, because select eyes messes with the ability to do that. Do you know how to add alt text to leaflet polygons? Do you have to use JavaScript?
I use JavaScript for the keyboard nav to be able to kind of pan in and out and move right or left. But I didn't do anything with the polygons there. I feel like that's probably possible, but I don't know if I've done it, so I don't want to say 100%. But I think I'll look into that right after this. I can reach out to you if I figure out a way. I feel like maybe somebody at Tidy Tuesday did that. That's their art community at MDH the other day, but maybe not. We'll see. I don't know. I don't have a 100% answer on that one. It's a good question though.
I believe that's all the questions. I'm just double checking the chat.
Thanks everyone. Really appreciate it. Good questions. Thanks for all of the questions too. It's lively group.
Lots of good things for us to think about as we continue our work. Oh, someone asked, you spoke about ARIA text earlier. Where and how would you add it in the code? A lot of the elements have something by default, and I just go with whatever the default is. I'm trying to recall. I think with buttons, there's a way to do it with when you do the button call. A way to do it, label or something. I forget what the option is, but I haven't explicitly done it with the drop downs and the text boxes and things.
You should be able to add an ARIA label to just about anything.
Oh, somebody mentioned that Chrome and other browsers have Lighthouse to check for accessibility compliance.
Yep. Lighthouse is another good tool.
Lots of thank yous. That's all I see.
Thanks, Yvonne.
Thank you. And feel free to follow up with us if you have more questions or thoughts.
Yep.